Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Since I became Muslim, I've heard many times people say things like, oh, you've become religious now, or oh, I could never be religious, or for example, I don't need a religion to be a good person. These statements need to be analyzed. In Arabic, we use the word deen, which loosely translates as a way or a way of life. Allah uses this word in the Quran alongside Islam. So if we define religion in this sense as a way of life based upon certain beliefs and principles, then no one escapes being religious. It's just that our religions differ. So the fact is, those who make these statements are actually, in fact, very religious, inherently religious, without realizing it, whether they like it or not. In our time, the average atheist, agnostic, secular Westerner will use language like, I believe in freedom of speech, which doesn't actually exist in any society on the face of this world. Or they'll say things like, it doesn't matter what you believe, as long as you're a good person. These concepts all stem from the religion of philosophical liberalism. As Christianity started to die out in Europe because of the irrational nature of the religion and the corruption in the church, the corruption of the hierarchy in the church in the 18th and 19th century, it was being replaced with philosophies such as atheism, liberalism, secularism. This time was called the Enlightenment period. It was in this time that philosophical liberalism really took hold. Like other religions, philosophical liberalism has its prophets, it has its scripture, and it has its God. Its prophets are the European Enlightenment philosophers and post-Enlightenment philosophers such as John Locke, J.S. Mill, David Hume, and more recently, Du Bois and Foucault. They have their religious scripture, which are the books that they wrote that define liberal ethics, their religious law, their sharia, and they have their God, which is the nafs, the self. The self is the object of worship in philosophical liberalism. The foundation of philosophical liberalism is to achieve absolute freedom and agency to live in accordance to one's desire, as long as you don't harm anyone. So the concept of YOLO, or do what thou wilt, these terms and these ideologies are completely in line with philosophical liberalism. The problem is that harm by their own terms is subjective, which is why the harm principle of J.S. Mill was refuted by other liberal philosophers, because they knew that harm is something subjective, and harm to someone could be benefit to someone else, or benefit to someone could be perceived as harm to someone else. Something that you believe is fine for you can actually have an extremely harmful knock-on effect for the rest of society. Look at, for example, deprived areas of England, or anywhere in the West for that matter. You have the highest percentage of off licenses, the highest percentage of betting shops. People are free to indulge in these activities under the idea of freedom of choice. Yet you find the most social ills in these areas. You find the most harm. This is why the statement, do what you want as long as you don't harm anyone, is meaningless when no clear boundaries exist, as is the case with philosophical liberalism. So, it's the God of the self which dictates the law, the sharia, by which many live their lives. In Arabic, the word for God is ilah, which means shay'un ma'bud, or that which is worshipped. And worship in Arabic is ibadah. Ibadah is to venerate or follow out of love, fear, or hope. Allah mentions in the Quran, have you seen the one who takes as his God his own desire? Have you seen the philosophical liberalist, the secularist, the atheist? They worship the self. They are not dissimilar to any other religious idol worshipper on the face of the earth. It's a different flavor, but the same thing, the same shirk.
أفرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه وأضله الله على علم وختم على سمعه وقلبه وجعل على بصره غشاوة فمن يهديه من بعد الله أفلا تذكرون وقالوا ما هي إلا حياتنا الدنيا نموت ونحيا وما يهلكنا إلا الدهر وما لهم بذلك من علم